Merkel Media.
This was all circulating around the base that a giant had been killed, but no one was supposed to talk about it.
I saw 3 long, bony fingers reach up underneath the door, curl up to grab it, and then disappear.
When he came over to me, dude, he slithered over to me.
And this giant comes out of the cave, and they're all frozen. And he starts running and firing at this giant. Well, the giant moves. He's got a spear in one hand, and he's running really fast and spears Dan and holds him up like this. Somebody yells, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. They basically decapitate him.
Got closer. When he got about 15 yards away from me, I raised that 12 gauge and I blowed his head off.
I feel something pulling at my leg, and I look over and there are 2 small gray entities pulling at me. And they're literally, I'm getting pulled off the bed.
I reached my hand into this bush and I touched air. Couldn't breathe and I couldn't move because I know I'm seeing a monster.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, everybody. You're listening to The Confessionals. I'm your host, Tony Merkel. Thanks for being here. If you have a crazy, wild experience you want to share with me on the show, go ahead and shoot me an email. My email address is theconfessionals@theconfessionalspodcast.com. That's theconfessionals@theconfessionalspodcast.com. Or go to the website, theconfessionalspodcast.com. Hit the contact section, and you can reach me that way as well. Either way works for me. Just get a hold of me. If you want to hear more shows on a weekly basis, go to theconfessionalspodcast.com. Hit the join button and become a member. There you can get yourself access to all the membership content on the website and the Castos app, which also offers the Tuesday shows ad-free and any overtime segments available. So if you want to get all that content, go to theconfessionalspodcast.com, hit the join button, and become a member. Also, go ahead and check out preparewiththeconfessionals.com. I don't got to talk about it a whole lot. You guys see the news. You see what's going on in the world. You see the shelves in the store. Store shelves are bare. You can't buy baby food anywhere, at least the baby formula and soon baby food, I'm sure. The way things are going, friends, you just want to make sure you're good. So whether it's at preparewiththeconfessionals.com or at your local store, scraping the food that's on the shelves and putting it in your cart and just getting what you can, whatever you got to do, make sure you do it now, because as the year goes on, they project the food shortages will get more in volume. So go ahead and make sure you are prepared for you and your family. Listen, friends, we are doing the Spirits Are In Tour. That's the Spirits Are In Tour. We're going to the Shanley Hotel. If you want to get involved in this action. Now, listen, last week I was reading off an old script, and I actually said the trip was on April 8th and 9th, I think I said. Well, we're way past that date. I gave you the wrong date. Listen, I got a lot on my plate right now. My head is like short-circuiting sometimes. The actual date for the Shanley Hotel is July 1st through the 2nd of 2022, this year. So this July 1st and 2nd, you can come with me on a tour to the Shanley Hotel. We're going to get on a bus, and we're going to have awesome stops on the way up and the way back. All the expenses of food and lodging is included in the price of the ticket. And if you want to get involved and go to Sleepy Hollow, the Shanley Hotel, which the Shanley Hotel is a very haunted hotel, apparently. I didn't know much about it till I started looking into it, but they actually make you sign a waiver before you stay there. And if you want, go to theconfessionalspodcast.com. We have a tab there for the Spirits Are In Tour. And at the very bottom of the page, I posted a video of people doing investigations there, so you can check that out. If you want to be part of the action, you got to contact Creed and Jen. You can email them at travelgrouptours@aol.com or call them at 973-513-9001. And Creed and Jen are the owners of Educated Wanderer. You can check out the website, educatedwanderer.com. And full disclosure, Creed is my brother-in-law. He's my wife's brother, so he is family, but he does a fantastic job. We already did tours like this before in the past, and people loved it, and I know you guys are going to love it too. So if you want part of this action, Spirits Are In Tour, got to contact Creed and Jen, and in the description of this episode, you can find all that information below right now. Friends, we got a great show coming up here. We have John coming on, and John shares different experiences, from the paranormal experiences. He had an experience where he was driving, and he believes he was saved, and what happened was he and the passenger in the car that was with him, they experienced something, but they experienced something that was very different. They had a very unique experience. He talks about working in a haunted warehouse, and he starts us off, though, with this infamous UFO crash site in Kentucky that made its rounds back in the early 2000s, but he has a very close connection because both his mom and dad had more information than even Art Bell had. So let's get to John and his experiences right now. All right, today we got John on the show. John, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Tony. You doing all right?
Yeah, man, I'm doing good. Thanks for joining me, man. You have some, it's like a mixed bag. You know, it's like a mixed bag of goodies. So we have some haunting paranormal stuff with Civil War kind of stuff, the Civil War battlefield, the Gettysburg battlefield. Then we're going to talk about you falling asleep behind the wheel and what happened there. We're going to talk about a haunted warehouse you worked at. But we're going to start off with the UFO crash site. Now, from what I understand, the UFO crash site seemed like it happened before you were even born. Is that right?
It happened actually about 12 years after I was born, but nobody ever really talked about it much, and I didn't find out about it until I had probably moved away from home and gotten married.
So you found out about it after you moved away from home?
Yeah. That's what really intrigues me about it is like it was kept so quiet.
All right. Well, why don't you take us into it and tell us what this whole story is, or this legend of a crashed UFO?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, before I get started, man, thank you again for having me on the show. My brother and I listen to you all the time, and we're just absolute big fans. So thank you for having me. I'm very honored. The UFO crash that I want to talk about, like I said, I didn't find out about it until I had gotten married and moved away from home. And I was actually driving a truck, running a night shift, and I heard some people on Coast to Coast radio show talking about it. And I thought, wait a minute, they're talking about my hometown here. I've never heard of this. So I started doing a little bit more research, and I talked to my parents about it, and my parents were like, oh, yeah, that happened. And so apparently what happened, this was in 2002, and this happened about 3 miles from where I live, and that's what baffled me even more. So it was a coal train, the CSX coal train. They were on their way to the depot.
1 second, before you go any further, can you tell us what town and state this is?
Yeah, this was in Paintsville, Kentucky, Johnson County.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make sure we got that before you went into the details.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was this coal train, and it was on its way. It had been to a coal mine, and it had picked up a train full of loaded coal cars, and they were headed back to the depot. I'm assuming to either, swap out train crews or whatever. And so, according to what I heard on Coast to Coast, this train crew, they'd come around the curve, and they saw, kind of around the curve, they saw these bright lights. And this area where this happened, there were a set of double tracks. And so the engineers said, I thought, maybe there was an oncoming train. So I dimmed my lights so I wouldn't blind the other train crew when we met them. And he said, we come around this corner, and off to our side down in the river, because the river followed the railroad tracks, he said, we see these lights hovering over the river. And he said, initially, I thought, well, there's somebody down there fishing. But he said, the more that I looked out my window, he said, I could see these discs. They look like, basically flying saucers sitting over top of the river. And he said, there were lights, and they were bright lights, and he said they were rotating around this disc. And he said, as we were focusing on that, he said, we come around the curve, and sitting directly in our path was another one of these flying saucers. And he said, immediately I applied the brakes to the train. But he said, I had a loaded train, probably 100 or more coal cars, and he said that thing wasn't going to stop. And he said, so when we come around that curve and I saw that thing, he said, I hit the brakes, and no sooner than I hit the brakes, he said, we slammed into this flying saucer. And he said it skipped off of the front of the locomotive, and it bounced up over to where the windshields are. It busted all the glass out of the top of the train, and it skipped off of the top, and it slid down the top of that locomotive, and it hit the trailing locomotive as well. And he said, we were just baffled, had no clue. And he said, we looked out our window, and all of the lights on the flying saucers down on the river immediately just took off. And he said, they were gone. Everything was gone. And he said, even the one that we hit, we have no clue what happened to it, but he said it was gone. And he said, as soon as we made contact with this, everything in the locomotive just died. All the electronics, everything, it's like they were just fried. And he said, even my wristwatch quit working. He said it froze in time at that exact moment. And he said everything on that locomotive was dead. And he said, luckily, one of the conductors on the locomotive, I don't know if he had a backup radio or something, and he was able to actually call in to the depot with this backup radio. He, we've made contact with something. We don't really know what it is, but nothing on our locomotive is working. Both engines are dead. So they said, all right, we'll send somebody out to get you. And based on what I've heard, they sent out 2 locomotives from the depot, and they hooked to this train, and they drug it on back into the depot and more or less limped it into the depot. And so that's kind of where that story stopped of what I heard on Coast to Coast. And so I had talked to my dad and my mom, and my dad said, oh yeah, I remember that happening. He said, I actually saw the locomotive. And I was like, wait a minute, you saw the locomotive this happened to? He's like, yeah. I was like, man, I've never heard this before. And he's like, well, I didn't think nothing about it, to be honest with you, until you're bringing this up. And my dad worked at a coal loadout where they actually loaded trains. He was on his way into work that morning, and he said, I got stopped at the train tracks because this was about 3 miles from where we live. He had to cross these tracks to get to work. And he said, I got stopped at the train tracks, and I sat there forever. And he said, finally, this train comes past. And he said, but I see the 2 locomotives at the front. And he said, usually, he said, I just thought, well, they're going slow or whatever. But he said, there wasn't any lights on this locomotive, either one of them. And he said, as the front locomotive passes, he said, the front windshields were busted out. He said, the top of it was caved in. And he said, I thought, they've hit a tree or something. And he said, but then it kind of hit me. I thought, well, if they'd hit a tree, the other locomotive would still have lights, and there would still be, the engines would still be running, obviously. But he said, these were silent, and there was nothing on them working. And he said, so the train passed. I didn't think nothing about it. I went on into work. And he said, I was talking to one of my friends, later throughout the day as another train come through. And he said, I was loading the coal train. And he said, I told one of my friends, he said, man, I saw just a bashed up locomotive this morning. He said, you know anything about it? And one of the engineers who had brought the train in that my dad was loading, he's like, yeah. He said, we got called in this morning to come pick up this train. He said, me and the conductor got called in to pull this train back into the depot. And he said, I'm not really sure what happened to it, but he said, when we got back to the depot, he said, it looked like something out of Unsolved Mysteries or something, He said, I've never seen anything like it. He said, there were people running around. He said, there were black SUVs sitting all over the depot. And he said, they come on our train and they told us, get off the train, go into the office, you're going in for a debriefing. And my dad said, what kind of debriefing did you get? And he said, I can't talk about it. That's all I can tell you, and I've probably told you too much at this point. So that was my dad's side of seeing this locomotive. And so my mom chimed in and she says, well, actually, I can tell you even more than that. And I'm like, holy crap, Mom, this happened and you guys haven't ever said anything about it. She said, well, it was just so odd at the time that nobody thought anything about it. But she said, we have a friend who works for the local newspaper. And he also worked for the local radio station as well. And she said he got a phone call early that morning that there had been a collision with a CSX train. And that he needed to go down to the depot immediately to see if he could figure out what had happened. So he said, I went down to the depot, and when I pulled in, he said, there were men, and I mean, it sounds cliche, but he said there were men in black suits, and he said they were running all over that depot. And he said, I could see these big, they looked like event tents that were set up over what I assumed was the locomotives. And he said, because I could see the coal cars sticking out the back. And he said the inside of the tents were all lit up. And he said these men approached my car, and I rolled the window down. And they said, we don't know who you are. We don't know why you're here, but you have no business being here. Please leave. And he said, well, I'm with the press. Here's my press badge. I'm working for the local newspaper. And they said, not today. You don't work for them today. Get out of here. And so he said, I just said, oh, okay. I got, turned around, and he said, as I was leaving, he said, I passed probably 10 or 15 blacked out SUVs and vans coming into the train depot. And he said, I just thought, man, something is up. Something is bad wrong. And so he said, I went downtown, got a cup of coffee at a gas station, and he said, I went back in a couple hours because I thought, whatever this is, it's going to take a little while, and maybe I can get a story for the paper. He said, I went back in a couple hours. Tents were gone. Locomotives were gone. All the people were gone. All the SUVs. He said, everything was gone, and everything looked like that nothing had ever happened. And so that's where that part of the story ended. And so I'm just curious about it. I thought, with your podcast that maybe there's somebody out there that may have some more information than this. Maybe have a little bit more detail about what happened. But I just find it very odd that this happened in my hometown, not 3 miles from where I grew up at. But I never heard about it until I moved away and was listening to Coast one night.
Yeah, that's strange. It's strange. You live there, you never hear about it until you move away and you find out about it on the radio. You talk to your parents and like, oh yeah. Let me tell you all the stories, like
yeah.
It's like, hey, Mom, Dad, you remember when we were really bored sitting at the dinner table all those years? This would have been a great story to tell one night,
Yeah, absolutely. I was like, y'all just keeping this information bottled up for the time that's right, It just really baffled me, and especially that my dad was like, oh, yeah, I saw that train. I remember seeing the locomotive.
Wow. So
yeah.
Was it that this thing was like crashing and it ran into, or the train ran into it, or was it already on the ground crashed?
From what I have heard, it was like it was hovering over the tracks, almost like it was waiting for the other ones to come join it. And they said when they come around that curve, it was hovering over the tracks, and they slammed into it.
Okay, so I was thinking maybe it was just my preconceived notions. I was thinking that this thing was something that was crashing, but it sounds like it was doing whatever it wanted to do. It just got almost like caught off guard and got hit.
Yeah, like they just got surprised or something, and the locomotive come right around, just slammed right into it. Yeah.
It's almost like the UFOs. It was like they were the teenage UFOs, and they were bored one night, and they decided to go play a game of chicken on the railroad tracks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, it's very interesting though, and the fact that there was some kind of, I guess. I mean, I don't even think you said government, but the blacked out SUVs. It seemed like there was some kind of government entity working on the situation, cover up wise.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what always baffled me was I thought, here in our small little town, I mean, we're in this town, we're like an hour and a half from a big city, a couple hours from even a bigger city. So, here we are in this little tiny town, and this happens, and it's like just all of a sudden, they show up out of nowhere, all these government officials. And that's what always made me think was, what was really going on there? What really happened that government officials showed up like that?
Yeah, it does make you wonder, because it's not like you guys. It's not like they had a UFO craft. They just had the train, right? The craft. Because you said the craft, they don't know what happened to it. It was just gone.
Yeah. They just had the locomotive, and it just makes me wonder. Like, was there more involved in what the conductors and engineers may have said that they saw? Or was there something else interconnected that was like, hey, we've kind of got an issue here that we need to get involved in? It's very odd, very, very odd.
Well, I mean, there's the fact that the train had lost power. So, I mean, there was definitely, outside of the physical damage, there was weird things that happened with the train that they could definitely be trying to study and learn about and understand. But then there's also the idea of, if you hit this craft, and if it did that damage to the locomotive, then I imagine the craft had some damage at least. What kind of damage is that? Did it leave any remnants on the train that the government entities are trying to collect and study, because it's some unknown element, Bob Lazar type stuff that got stuck on the train that they want to take advantage of? I mean, the very first Men in Black story, from what I understand, was back in 1947, I think it is. I'm actually butchering this. This is part of the documentary that I was a narrator on. But the guy was out in his boat, and he witnessed a UFO crashing into the water. And when it was crashing, it was emitting some kind of substance, and it landed on his boat. It hit his son, and his son's arm was badly damaged from it, and it apparently had hit his dog as well, and his dog died. And so,
Wow.
Yeah, he was visited by the Men in Black after this and all that stuff. But I mean, if you got a locomotive that hit a UFO, you never know what could have come off that they actually wanted, just pieces of whatever came off that UFO.
Yeah.
Anyways, very interesting.
Yeah, I like that. I'm hoping that there's somebody out there that may have a little bit more, backstory or maybe some more information. And I just thought it was worth sharing, because I mean, I'm 33, and I got married when I was 20, and so I thought, I've lived there for 20 years and never heard this until I moved out and got married, and so I just thought it was worth sharing. I thought your podcast would be a good platform for sharing that and maybe finding out some more information about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do appreciate you sharing it. It was a very interesting story, even though it was like a secondhand account kind of thing. It definitely was worth sharing. It's very interesting. But who knows? I mean, if somebody out there listening right now knows what you're talking about, they got more information, feel free to reach out to us and stuff, and I can forward email addresses and all that stuff if you guys want. But yeah. So, John, let's talk about some stuff here with the paranormal. Now, from what I understand, this is like the earliest thing that happened to you as far as the paranormal goes. You had an experience in the Gettysburg battlefield. Is that right? That's not far from me, actually.
Yeah, that's correct.
So what happened?
Well, let's see. This was the first actual paranormal thing that ever happened to me. And I'll start off by saying I'm a Civil War reenactor, and I started doing Civil War reenactments when I was around 12, and I had a bunch of good friends and their dads. They all done reenactments, so we would all go to reenactments together and camp together. And so when I was around 15, my buddies and their dads and my parents, we had gotten together. We had decided that we were going to do a Civil War reenactment on Friday through Saturday, and then on Sunday we were going to pack up and go straight to Gettysburg, and we were going to stay in Gettysburg for a week. And none of us had been, and it was just something that we thought would be pretty neat to do.
since we were all history buffs. So my parents, they knew the dad of my buddies, and they're like, look, we're going to let you go to this Gettysburg trip, and we're just going to, let the dads kind of chaperone you, and we've already given permission to basically beat you if you get out of line, but we're going to let you go on this trip to Gettysburg with your friends. And so we done the Civil War reenactment, and on Sunday we packed up and we drove to Gettysburg. And we get there and we start doing all the tourist things. We go to all these museums and go to different sites. We saw Big Round Top, Little Round Top, went to Devil's Den, Pickett's Charge. We actually walked Pickett's Charge. We done all those things, visited all the shops. And so one night we're sitting at the hotel and we see that there's a ghost tour getting ready to start. And so my buddies and I were like, yeah, let's go on a ghost tour. And so all the dads of my buddies were like, yeah, that sounds fun. Let's go do that. So we walked down there and signed up. And we start on this ghost tour. And the lady's walking us around. And, she's telling us in this building at certain times you can look through the window and you can see, a general sitting by the fire doing whatever. And so at one point she takes us out to this field. It's just kind of an empty field, but it's set adjacent to a cemetery, one of the bigger cemeteries up there, right off of I think is it Steinway Avenue.
I don't know it that well. I know Gettysburg's like 2 hours from me. That's about all I know.
Yeah, I think it's off of that Steinway Avenue, but I know it's adjacent to a very big cemetery. And so she takes us out to this field, and she says, now, over in this back corner, a lot of our tour, people on the tour, they claim to see an apparition come up over this bank, and it moves towards the center of the field like it's looking for something, and then it disappears. So we're all on this tour, and we're looking, and the long story short is we done the entire tour, and we never saw anything. And so we all come back to the hotel, and we were like, oh, man, that's a bust, So the next day, we're sitting around, and evening time comes, and the dads at this point, I think they're kind of wore out of being chaperones. They're like, listen, kid, you all are 15, 16. One of us was 18 at the time. He's like, the dads are going to go down to a pizza pub and have some pizza, and you guys just get to hang out here at the hotel. And he's like, if you need anything, we got a cell phone, you can call us, but we're just going to go eat a pizza. And so we're like, yeah, that's fine. That sounds good. We'll hang out here. Well, I'm sitting in a hotel room, and I'm looking out the window, and I see this line for another ghost tour lining up. And I get this idea in my head. I look over at my buddy. He's sitting there watching TV. I jump up, and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, nothing, man. I'm going to go take a walk. But I said, first, I'm going to do something. So I went in the bathroom, and I put on my Civil War uniform because I had it with me, because we had just come from a Civil War reenactment. And I don't know why I thought this was a good idea, but for some reason I thought it was, I guess. And so I come out of the bathroom in my Civil War uniform, and my buddy's like, man, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just going to go take a walk. I'm good. No, don't worry about it. I'll be right back. Just a couple minutes. So I'm watching out the window, and this ghost tour group, they leave. So I sneak out of the hotel, cut over a couple of blocks, and I end up in this field that we had been to the night before. And I go back into this corner, and I find this big oak tree. And I kind of kneel down by this oak tree, and I'm waiting, and sure enough, here comes the ghost tour on the other side of the field. And I can see their flashlights, and I can vaguely hear across the field, I can hear the tour guide talking. Well, as they make their way out towards the field, I gradually start kind of creeping up the bank. I come out behind this tree, I creep up the bank, and I ease out into the middle of this field. Well, I stand up a little bit, and then I crouch down like I'm looking for something. I'm looking for something in the grass, just like she had told us the night before. Well, about this time, I can hear people in the tour group. I can hear people crying. I can hear people screaming. I can hear people laughing. And then I see all these cameras flashing, And in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, you done it, man. You give them a good experience. And still, I just 15 years old. I don't know what was going through my mind. And so I just kind of turn around and real slowly just kind of make my way back, I go back over this bank and kind of, when I say bank, I mean just like a little hill, I go over the bank and get back up behind this oak tree. Well, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to let this group, once they move on, I'll go back to the hotel room and tell my buddy what I've done. And as I'm sitting by this oak tree, man, I feel on my left shoulder a very distinct hand grab me by the shoulder. And when it grabs me, it pins me against this oak tree. And I'm thinking, man, somebody else is out here and they're just kicked off that I'm being stupid. And I look up and there's nobody there. But I'm still pinned to this tree. And I've got this pressure right on my shoulder, right where your shoulder, I guess your collarbone and stuff is at. I've got this pressure. And man, at that point in time, I absolutely just freak out. I jump up and I take off running. And I mean, I don't stop running until I make it back to the hotel room. And forget the tour group, they're still standing over there. I take off flying. I get back to the hotel room. My buddy's still sitting there. He's like, man, what are you doing? What, you're all out of breath. And I was like, yeah, I went out for a jog instead of a walk, And so I go in the bathroom and I start taking my Civil War uniform off. I take my jacket off. I take my shirt off. Well, when I take my shirt off, I'm looking in the mirror. I have the very distinct outline of somebody's handprint on my shoulder. I mean, I'm talking, I can see almost the individual fingers on my shoulder where I had been grabbed by something. And man, when I saw that, man, I got lost it. I was like, oh God, I've dabbled with something I shouldn't have dabbled with. And I got lost it. So I come out of the bathroom and my friend's still sitting there. He's like, man, what's going on? I was like, nothing. Everything's good, man. I'm fine. It's all right. No big deal. So I just go to bed. I don't even talk to anybody else the rest of the night. And I just still just absolutely terrified. So the next day we get up and we kind of go about our day doing different things. That evening I see the lady who's the tour guide of these ghost tours. And I'm feeling bad. I'm thinking, I need to come clean that what they saw was just me being a dumb kid. I'm out there just acting stupid. And I need to confess that it was me, So I walk over to this lady and I said, hi, how are you guys doing? She said, oh, we're good. And I said, well, did you guys see anything, great on your tour last night? And she said, yeah, actually we did. She said, we saw more than we probably thought we were going to. And I said, oh, really? And she's like, yeah, we went out to that field over there, the one adjacent to the cemetery. And she said, I was telling the tour group about how there's an apparition that appears, like he's looking for something. She said, sure enough, she said, I mean, almost as soon as I'm telling the group this, she said, here comes this. She said, it almost looks solid, like an apparition. Comes up over this little bank and out behind this tree and walks over to the middle of the field like they're looking for something. And she said, then he turns around and goes back. And she said, I don't know what it was. And as she's telling me this, I'm thinking, all right, I've got to tell her it was me. I'm going to tell her it was me. And she says, but then we hear somebody running, like they're just absolutely flying, running down the blacktop. And she said, about that same time, we see a second apparition come out behind this tree. It moves over towards the middle of the field where the first one went, looks around like it's looking for something, and it disappears into the ground.
Wow.
And man, when she told me that, I mean, I'm getting chills when I'm thinking about it now. When she told me that, you could have picked my chin up off of the sidewalk. And I said, okay, I just wanted to know, I'm just curious. She told me that. I went back to the room and we done the rest of our thing in Gettysburg and went home. And man, that was the first paranormal experience I'd ever had, and it was absolutely terrifying. And I mean, I still to this day, when I think about being grabbed by something, and then the fact that after I took off running, that it come out behind the tree and disappeared into the ground, that absolutely just terrifies me to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, at least it gives confirmation as to what you experienced. I mean, not that you needed it after you saw yourself when you got back, but did you ever tell her that you were out there though, or did you just let that go?
I just kind of let that go at that point. When she told me that they had saw a second apparition, I thought, I got what was coming to me. I deserved that, and I was floored that she had told me that, and my mind just kind of went blank. I mean, here I was standing on a 15-year-old kid, and I was just like, okay, got it, I got it, and I should have, but I was just a 15-year-old kid, and I don't know, it was just too much sensory overload, I guess.
Well, I don't think it really matters. I mean, you had enough going on at that point, and enough confirmations going on from her. She I don't think it would have done anybody good anyways if you would have said I was out there or this, that, and the other, because they still saw something and you still felt something.
Yeah.
So what's the story behind this other battlefield?
It is kind of similar in a way. We had went to another Civil War reenactment. This was a couple years after the Gettysburg incident. This time it was on an actual battlefield here in Kentucky. And we had come in and set up our camp Friday night. And everything was fine. Everything was normal. We done our battle on Saturday. And going into Saturday night, everybody was talking about how there was just such an odd presence, like a heavy, heavy presence. And everybody's like, something's just off. It's like we almost awakened something. There's just an odd presence here. The air feels heavy, and everybody just kind of in doom and gloom. And so we were just kind of all talking about that. And into Saturday night, my buddies and I, we sat around and built a campfire. We were talking, just, more or less shooting the bull about the day and what was going on. And so we decided, all right, it's time to go to bed. We're all going to crash out. I went to bed. I went to my tent, closed the door, and laid down, went to sleep. Well, probably around 2 or 3 o'clock, I wake up, and I can hear, like, mumbling. It's like somebody's having a conversation just out of earshot. And I lay there. I thought, man, it's got like really cold outside. Now it's September. It shouldn't be this cold at night. And I lay there for a little bit. I kept hearing these mumbling voices. So finally, I thought, man, I don't know who this is talking at this early in the morning, but I'm going to tell them to shut up. I'm tired. And so I grab a blanket and wrap it around my shoulders, and I open up the door to my tent. Well, when I do, I stick my head out, and outside there's like a 20-degree difference in temperature. Like it was like walking out of a beer cooler into the into the grocery store. Like obviously noticeable difference. And I was like, man, that's kind of odd. Like I was laying in my bed in my tent, like I could see my breath. I was like, that's kind of freaky. Well, my buddy in the tent next to me, about the time he sticks his head out, and he's like, dude, who are you talking to? I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I keep hearing conversations. Like, I can't make out what they're saying, but somebody's talking. No, it's not me. I was like, I heard the same thing, though. And he said, man, I thought it got cold. But, man, it's warm out here. And I said, yeah, something's up. And so me and him, we went out of our tents and we walked down to where we had a campfire built, kind of kicked the fire up. We were sitting there just for a few minutes talking. And at the very end of this row, when we set up tents, we set them all up in a row, like the old pictures you see of the Civil War tent set up. And at the very end of this row, on the opposite end of where the fire pit was, one of our friends, he sticks his head out of his tent, and his name's Charlie. And he sticks his head out and he says, "You boys shut up." He's like, "I'm trying to sleep." We're like, yeah. And he's like, "You all are just at the end of my tent talking." "No, Charlie, we've been sitting down here for, the last 10 minutes. We've not been down there." He's like, "Oh, it doesn't matter anyway. I'm up now. I gotta go use the bathroom." He gets up, goes to the bathroom. He comes back, and he goes in his tent, and we can hear him and his wife kind of getting into an argument. We're like, "What's going on?" They get up, go use the bathroom. They bother her when he wake her up or whatever. So just a couple minutes goes by, and he comes out and he says, "Which one of you all were in my tent?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "One of you all were inside of my tent just now. Which one of you was it?" "Charlie, we've not moved from this campfire." Like, number one, your wife's in there asleep, and we're just not going to do that. I'm like, number two, we've been sitting here this whole time. Nobody was in your tent. He's like, "All right." So he said, "I got up to use the bathroom." He said, "My wife says she remembers me going." She rolls over and looks at my cot where I was sleeping, and she sees me laying in my cot, covered up with a blanket. She can see the black hair on the back of my head, and she said it was kind of cold in the tent, so she put an extra blanket on. And she says, but then, about 2 minutes after that, I come walking through the tent, and there's nobody laying in my bed. And he said, "So I need to know which one of you all has been in there messing with my wife, trying to scare her." And we were like, "Dude, no, nobody's been in there. We've sat right here this whole time." So a couple minutes later, Charlie and his wife, they end up walking out, and they go and sleep in their vehicle the rest of the night. And she's very visibly shaken. She's crying. And, we just felt terrible. Number one, like, does he believe us that we've sat here? Number two, she's seen something that's, absolutely just terrified her. And so the next morning rolls around, we're all sitting around talking, and Charlie and his wife come back, and they kind of tell us more in detail about what happened. And everybody in that campsite had some form of an experience that night. And mine was hearing people mumbling and then hearing what Charlie had happen. So we had a Civil War church service just a couple of hours after Charlie and his wife came back into camp that morning. And everybody at that church service was talking about the night before and how dark things felt, how heavy the presence was. And that morning at that church service, there were 28 people who were saved and baptized in a horse pond at this battlefield. And every one of them, when they got up, they said, "Something hit us last night. We felt so heavy and so dark that we felt like that there was just nothing left for us. We felt like we were at the end, and we knew that if we didn't get saved, that something bad was going to happen to us." And that in itself was just wild. To go from that dark, heavy presence to having those experiences to having 28 people saved and baptized because of that presence that they experienced the night before, man, that was just an odd time.
It sounds like it, man. It sounds like it. This all happened with the battlefield.
Yeah. This all happened on the original battlefield, and we had done some research prior to going to this, and there had been 9 soldiers killed at this particular battlefield, and some of them had been buried actually on site, while a couple others of the other bodies had been taken back to where they were from and buried, but there were still soldiers buried on this battlefield site.
were there graves known as far as the location goes?
No, and that's the other thing that made all of us a little bit creeped out, was because the graves locations were not known. They just had a marker just set up at the entrance to the battlefield that said, "This is dedicated to the 9 men who lost their lives, at this battlefield. Such and so graves are unknown." And it had the names of the other soldiers who had been reinterred at family cemeteries. But there were still somewhere on that property buried that nobody knows where they were buried.
Wow. Well, if you want to talk about unsettled spirits, I mean, that would be something that I would imagine is going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was such an odd presence. And I mean, I remember sitting there thinking, something's just not right. It doesn't feel right. You could just feel that dark, heavy presence.
Yeah, I can understand that. I've never been really at a Civil War battlefield in my adult life. I mean, I've been to Gettysburg as a kid, but ever since I've been doing this stuff, I've never been to like any kind of area. But it just seems like these areas are probably pretty heavy, when you get into them and stuff. In fact, I should take that back actually, because I did do the what do you call it? The World War II prisoner of war camp. And, when I was there, I would say that I felt a deep sense of history, knowing that this stuff, that what happened at this location, Nazis killing Nazis and being interrogated, and the fact that this was one of the few camps of the at least 50 camps we had in the country, which we did have more than 50 camps, but every state I know had at least one camp in it. This camp was one of the few camps where they were brought there right off the boat to be interrogated before they got dispersed, and the things that happened at this location. So I had a sense of history, which kind of felt like, wow, there was some crazy stuff that happened here, but I don't know if I could say it felt ominous or anything like that.
Yeah, it was definitely odd. And my father-in-law, he's a very well versed historian, and he kind of believes like I do that there are certain things out there more than us. There are spiritual things, and I remember him saying at the time, he said, it's almost like that us doing that battle has awakened something. He said it's almost like it's called those spirits back to life. He said, I don't understand what it is. He said, but there is obviously something going on. And I had never thought of it that way. He said, if it's just the cannon smoke or the horses or, the people, he said, I don't know what it is, but something has awakened the spirit. And that's definitely what it felt like that night, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it makes sense. That makes sense to me. It does make sense. So, very interesting. And have you ever been back there since?
I had not been back to that battlefield since. They had changed the location due to some unknown reason, and we had never been back since.
Well, maybe one day you'll go back. I don't know. I mean, is that something you do?
Yeah, potentially. I think that might be something that I would be interested in at some point in time. Just to see, just to try to get because I mean, there's obviously something there,
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the falling asleep behind the wheel story, because that seems to be the next thing that happened in your life that is of significance.
Yeah. This one is more of a, you hear people talking of, I've got a guardian angel looking over me type thing. This was right after I graduated high school. I had gotten a job working at a coal mine, and I was driving an hour and a half one way to work and back. And so I found out that there was a guy that I worked with. Him and I lived in the same town, and so he would drive one week and I'd drive with him. and then I would drive one week, and he would ride with me. And so we traveled this old crooked, curvy road every day, going to work back in the hills to this coal mine. And an hour and a half of driving, we would leave for work at 4:00 in the morning, and so an hour and a half of driving that early in the morning, just drowsy, and this particular time it was winter time, and so we were running the heat, trying to stay warm but get sleepy at the same time, and so we were driving to work this morning, and the guy riding with me, he had fell asleep, and I was coming around this curve, and I could feel myself getting drowsy, and I was thinking, how can I stay awake without waking my friend up over here? And I was trying to, do different things, keep my eyes open the best way I could, and I drifted off to sleep. And about the time that I realized I drifted off to sleep, I opened my eyes and I looked up to the highway, and I looked at the highway. There was this like a mist form of a person standing in the middle of the road. And when I seen it, I didn't have enough time to stop. I run through whatever this mist was. It wasn't solid, but it was, basically in the shape of a person. It was around 5 or 6 foot tall, and maybe a couple feet across. And it wasn't foggy out this morning. This was a cold, really cold winter morning. There wasn't any fog, and whatever it was, I ran straight through it. And man, it woke me up. My eyes were just glued open. There was no going back to sleep. And so I drove on into work, parked up, and got out. My friend, he got out of the car. My friend tells me, he said, man, I thought you were going to hit that car back there. I said, what car? He said, car that flipped up on its side back there, and all those people were standing around. Man, there wasn't any car in the road. He's like, man, I'm telling you, there was a car flipped up on its side, and I don't know how you didn't hit those people. So I started telling him what happened to me about looking up. And on the way home from work that evening, we come around the curve, and he's like, right here is where I saw that car flipped up on its side. And I said, right here is also where I saw something standing in the middle of the road that woke me up. And me and him just kind of looked at each other, and he's like, I think sometimes the good Lord does things to just look out for you. And he said, I think that's probably what happened. And he said, I don't know what I saw, but he said, I think it was just maybe a premonition that something had happened here before, and whatever you saw was your sign of making sure that it didn't happen again. And we just drove on home. And I thought after that, I told my fiance, my wife now, I told her at the time, I said, I really think that, I had the good Lord watching over me that morning. I said, because if not, I very well could have flipped my car, and we both would have been killed, more than likely. And so that's just very interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. So you didn't see any car or people. You just saw this mist. All I saw was just this mist, just kind of standing in the middle of the road. If it had been more solid, it would have resembled a person completely if it had been more solid. But that's all I saw. I never saw a car. There wasn't a car, to the best of my knowledge, or any people standing around it. No. So, with what you just said, you're assuming he was seeing things that weren't there?
Yeah, from what he told me, that's kind of what I thought. I thought, man, you're seeing something completely different than what I saw. I didn't see that, and I'm not sure. I really don't know what to make of that.
Yeah, me neither. It's interesting though. It's interesting. I'm sitting here thinking. So you doze off, you open up your eyes, you see this thing in the road, you drive right through it. What makes you feel so sure that he's the one that was seeing things and not you?
Well, I really don't know. That's a good question, because I was obviously pretty drowsy And like I said, whichever one drove, the other one usually slept. And we would kind of wake up in it, whichever one's asleep. If we were going through a certain part of town, we'd kind of, hey, you want to stop here, get something to eat or whatever? No, they'd go back to sleep. If it was me, I'd go back to sleep or whatever. So I'm not really sure. I mean, I may have been the one seeing things, or he may have been the one seeing things. I'm not really sure.
But one thing's for sure. You both were seeing things, but one of you weren't seeing things at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know for certain that I didn't see what he was looking at. And, he says he didn't see what I was looking at, but we both saw something that I think kind of woke both of us up and give both of us the creeps.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would definitely give me the creeps, too.
Yeah.
So what is this story about the warehouse? I'm assuming this was a haunted warehouse that you worked in?
Yeah. Yeah, this this thing right here, man, I was talking to my brother about it earlier, and I was telling him, I was like, this wasn't just a paranormal experience. This was a paranormal kind of lifestyle almost for the amount of time that I worked here. I had gotten a job working in a parts warehouse for Caterpillar equipment. And so we had things, turbos and track segments and, blades for dozers and, all kinds of different things for Caterpillar machinery. And I had gotten this job, and I started working third shift. So I was working 8 o'clock at night till 5:30 in the morning. And when second shift would leave at 11, I was by myself for the rest of the night. And until we had a parts truck that he came in at 5, but I would lock up all the doors, and the only way the parts truck driver could get in, he had to ring a buzzer. And I would go around, let him in, fill out the paperwork, and start unloading his truck. And so I started working here, and I was young. I was 21, and started working. And first couple of weeks, everything was just normal. I would hear noises and pops and cracks, but I thought, I'm in a warehouse, and as the night goes on, I'm going to hear the building settle and whatever. So I didn't think anything about it. A couple of weeks goes by, everything's normal. I start hearing noises at night after second shift would leave that were noises that I really couldn't explain. They weren't like normal building settling sounds. They weren't pops and cracks. They were more like sounded like things were being kind of rattled around on shelves. It sounded like boxes were being shifted around, and I thought, I'm just imagining stuff. That's not what I'm hearing. So I started telling my wife, I was like, I don't know what's going on at this warehouse. I was like, I'm hearing noises that they're not normal. I was like, am I just too tired from working nights? And she said, I don't know. I wouldn't play into it. So, I don't know, a couple months into working in this warehouse, and I keep hearing these noises that just sounds like somebody's in there with me. And so one night, I know for certain nobody else is in there with me. This is 2 o'clock in the morning, probably. I go in to use the bathroom. And as I'm standing there, right outside of the bathroom door, I hear this very distinct whistle. And I'll never forget it. It's just, but it was a whistle. And I thought, who in the crap is in this warehouse besides me? I've locked every single door. There's nobody in here. So I come out of the bathroom, finish washing my hands, come out of the bathroom. Well, by the time I come out of the bathroom door, in this warehouse, we had these really long parts counters that had metal tops on them. A lot of the parts that we handled were so heavy that these counters had to have metal tops on them, or it would damage the wood, gouge the wood, whatever. Well, about the time I come out of the bathroom, I hear what sounds like somebody slamming down all of these heavy metal parts, like if you had like an armload of stuff and you were trying to get it up on a like a table or something, you finally get it up on the table and you just kind of let loose and all of it just kind of bundles out and falls.
Yeah.
That's what this sounded like. But it sounded like somebody just dropped an armload of stuff on top of this metal counter. So I was like, all right, somebody's in here. What's going on? So I come running up to the parts counter. There's nothing there. It's an empty parts counter. And I'm like, oh, all right, this is kind of getting out of hand. Like, there's obviously something in here, or I'm just hallucinating. One, I'm really tired. One, there's all kinds of variables. So I go back into the bathroom. I go in my locker and I grab a set of earbuds. Like, I'm not going to listen to these noises. I've got to tune my mind off of this. It's getting the better of me. So I put in a set of earbuds, go and jump on a forklift, and I've still got some parts in the back that I had to put up from the truck that had come in the night before. So I go flying down the aisle on a forklift, and I'm scooping up boxes and putting them up on shelves with the forklift. I come around the corner, and when I come around this corner, man, I see a guy standing at the end of a parts rack in dark pants and a dark shirt. And I look for a split second, and he's there, and all of a sudden he's gone. I slam on the brakes, and I got chills thinking about it now. I slammed on the brakes, and I was like, holy crap, what did I just see? I'm like, no, John, you're just hallucinating, man. You didn't see that. So I lay the fuel to it on this old forklift, man. I take off, go down another aisle, pick up a box, and I'm thinking, I didn't see that. I didn't see that. There's no way I saw that. I come back down this aisle, turn the corner, and there this guy stands again. I'm saying a guy. It was a figure. There he stands again. Dark pants, dark shirt, standing at the end of this parts rack. And I just, all right, I'm done. I'm done for the night. And I go in and I sit in the break room. And I sat in that break room until I heard the buzzer of the night truck driver coming in to drop parts. I go out there and I let him in, unload that truck, and I clock out and go home. I told my wife I got home. I was like, I know I've been telling you I've been hearing noises. I was like, listen, there is something in that warehouse. She said, no, I think you're just hearing stuff. I said, I've seen stuff. I said, tonight I saw a figure twice. And I said, there's something in there. So the next night I get ready, come into work, kind of dreading it, just thinking, man, I'm hoping that whatever happened last night, that was it. That's not going to happen again. Come into work, second shift leaves. Sure enough, I start hearing these noises, and it sounds like like the shipping crates that it's a pallet on the bottom and it's got a big cardboard box on top.
Yeah, like the Gaylords.
Well, yeah. Well, it sounds like that in the back of this warehouse that somebody's picking one of these boxes up on the end and it's sliding it across the warehouse. And it's a very distinct wood on concrete floor sound. And I was like, what is going on? There's no way somebody's in here. So jump on the forklift, take off, going back through there. Nobody back there. Come back out, turn the corner. There this figure stands at the end of this parts rack. And I jump out of my skin. Just lay the fuel to it, take off. And I go up front, I'm sitting, and I'm like, I got a job to do. I can't come in here and sit and be terrified. I've got to go back out and work. So I go back out, jump on the forklift, take off, and see the figure again. And at this point in time, I stop, and I'm like, look, here I am. I'm just trying to work. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who I'm bothering. I don't know why I'm bothering you. I'm just trying to do my job. And I've got a job to do. I have to be in here. I'm not trying to mess with anything. I'm just trying to do my job so I can go home. I get paid and go home. I done that. Didn't see anything else the rest of that night. And I was like, all right, so maybe maybe I've leveled with whatever this is. That hey, I'm just here to do a job. I'm not here to cause any problems. And so a couple weeks goes by after that, and things kind of settle down just a little bit. And I'm still hearing the noises, though. You know, I was like somebody's in these parts bins looking for stuff. So I had gotten to the point that I told my wife, I was like, you know, I've got a coworker that really doesn't work there, like in a physical sense. I was like, he's just there, but he's not on a payroll. And so my wife is like, no. So she comes down one night to eat lunch with me, and we're sitting in the parts warehouse, and she had brought me lunch, and this is around midnight, 1 o'clock. And she's like, well, you know, this has been a pretty peaceful lunch. I haven't heard anything from your coworker. About that time, in the back, I hear this same dragging noise, like a pallet dragging across the floor. She said, what is that? And I said, that's what I've been telling you that I'm hearing. She's like, oh my gosh, are you serious? And yes. I was like, that's not a building popping and cracking, right? She's like, no, that's something being dragged. And so she's like, I'm going home. She's like, that's just too much. She's like, I can't deal with that. Like, I'm going home. I was like, that's not that. I was like, I'm just kind of glad at this point that somebody else doesn't think I'm nuts. You know, like my wife has heard it too. And so, you know, I worked the rest of that night and everything was fine. Well, we get to telling my wife's sister. And my wife's sister is like, there's no such thing as ghosts. And, you know, I'm going to come down there one night. And I was like, come on. So my wife and her sister, they come and eat lunch with me another night. And we're sitting there and everything's quiet. My sister-in-law says, hadn't heard anything going on. I don't think there's anything going on in here. I think you're just over-imagining things. Well, about that time, from the top shelf, a big old box of filters comes flying off of that top shelf and hits the floor. I had put those filters up there probably 30 minutes prior to them being there, and I had all hand stacked them in myself. So I know there was no reason for them to come falling back out because they were so high up. I took extra care to make sure that they wouldn't fall out. If they would fall out, they'd hurt somebody. And they come toppling off of this top shelf. And my sister-in-law goes, okay, got it. Got it. And I said, I'm telling you, there's something here, and it's not to be messed with. I was like, I'm being very respectful. I've told whatever it is that I'm just here to work. I'm not here to cause any problems. I'm just working. And I was like, you can't come in here and say stuff like, I don't believe this, I don't believe in that. And I said, because obviously something is here. And I said, whatever you just said right there provoked what just happened. And so my wife was like, all right, we're going to leave, you know. And my sister-in-law was pretty upset at this point in time. She's like, yeah, we've got to get out here. I'm sorry. And so that, you know, stuff like that kept happening. Well, a couple of weeks goes by, and I'm kind of wondering, you know, like, do I need to tell people in here about this? Do I need to tell people that I'm seeing stuff, that I'm hearing stuff? So one night comes up that I have to call in sick, not able to make it in. And so they get another guy to cover for me. And so I take that night off. I come in the next day, and the boss calls me in the office, and he's like, John, we had a problem last night. And I said, what's going on? He said, we had to call the police down here. And he said, have you ever had anybody get in this warehouse at night? I said, no, I've never had any problems with people getting in here. Just, you know, the night truck driver comes in, I let him in, but that's it. And he said, we had to call the police down here last night. He said, we got a guy to cover for you. The guy's name was Mike. He said, we got Mike to cover for you. And he said he was up front after second shift had left, and he was working on the parts counter shipping parts. And he said he looks up, and in that warehouse there was a door that led into a stairwell, and the stairwell goes upstairs to where there's a bunch of classrooms, like training classrooms in the warehouse. He said Mike looks up from this parts counter, and he sees a guy standing at the door to the stairwell. And he says, "Hey, you can't be in here. It's after hours." And he said, this guy goes through the door to the stairwell, like opens the door, like the door opens, because he said he heard the door close. And he said he goes to the door to the stairwell, so Mike takes off following him. He said, I go through this door to the stairwell, just in enough time that I see this guy going through the upstairs door. So he said, I run upstairs, and I'm hollering the whole time, hey, you can't be in here. After hours, there's nobody working. You can't be in here. He said, I get up to the top of the stairs, and at the top of the stairs, it goes down this long hallway where all the classrooms are. He said, I get to the top of the stairs. I look down this long hallway. It's dark. The lights are turned off. Obviously, nobody's in the building. He said, about that time, I hear a door at the end of the hallway, one of the last classrooms. I hear this door slam. Pow. And he said, I thought, all right. Obviously somebody's got in here. Somebody's broke in here. They're looking for something. They're trying to do something. He's like, I'm done with fooling with whoever it is. So he calls the boss, and he's like, look, somebody's broke in. I've had all the doors locked all night long, but there's somebody in here. He's like, I just chased them up the stairs. He's like, they're upstairs in one of the training classrooms. He said, I heard them slam the door, and I've got them cornered. He's like, you're going to have to come down here and figure out what's going on. He's like, I've got them cornered. They can't get out. So about 10 minutes goes by, and my boss said, I showed up. He said, I called the police, and he said, we couldn't get in the building. All the doors were locked. And he said, so I let the police in. We go into the stairwell, go up the stairs, and he said, I see Mike standing at the top of the stairs. He's all puffed up, like he's all defensive. He's, somebody's going to come out. He's going to have to tackle him or something, And he said, he's all puffed up. He's like, they're in that room right there. He's like, I guarantee you, he said, they're in that room, because he said, they slammed that door as I come up here. He said, all the other doors are open. They slammed that door. They're in there. So police go down through there, shining their flashlights, open up the door to the classroom. Classroom's empty. Nobody in there. And so Mike is like, I know he was in there. Like, I followed him up these stairs. And I was like, are you serious? Like this really happened for real? And my boss said, yeah, absolutely. He's like, we've got the police report. You can read it. So I read through the police report, and it confirmed everything that my boss had told me. So I go out into the warehouse. I see Mike standing there, and I was like, man, thanks for covering for me. And he said, yeah, don't ever ask me to do that again. And I said, okay, I'm sorry. I was sick. And I said, just out of curiosity, I said, this guy that you saw, I said, what did he look like? He said, dude, dark pants and a dark shirt. And he said, I could just barely make out the back of his head. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? And he's like, no. He's like, it looked like somebody that worked here almost. The uniforms that we had to wear to work in that warehouse were dark blue pants and a dark work shirt. And so he said, I thought somebody may have broken in, or at the very weirdest, somebody just forgot something at work and decided to show up at 2 o'clock in the morning to get it. And he said, don't ever ask me to cover for you again. He said, I don't know what I saw, but he said, all I know is I've got a couple of police officers and a boss who thinks that I'm losing my mind. And I said, well, I can assure you, you're not losing your mind. I said, you saw what you saw. I said, because I've been seeing the same thing in this warehouse for the last couple of months. And so, after that, I worked a couple of more weeks, and I had put in for a job to transfer out of the parts warehouse into a mechanic shop, and I got that job, and I transferred out, and I never had any more paranormal experiences, any more run-ins, or anything of that sort after that point, after I transferred out. And I don't know what it was. I don't know who it was. And, you know, I had often wondered the company I was working for, there are a lot of older guys who work there. And since I've left that company, even there have been a lot of older guys who have passed away. And I talked to my wife, and I said, you know, I just kind of wonder if maybe there hadn't been somebody who had worked there that had passed away that just couldn't get any rest in the afterlife, and that was what they had to do, was to come back every night to make sure things were done right. And I said, because whatever happened to me wasn't really malicious. And I said, especially after I had just said, look, hey, I'm just here to work. I'm trying to do the best I can. I said, you know, after I've done that, things were kind of like, okay, I'm going to pop up from time to time, but I'm not going to bother you. And, you know, you do your job. And like I said, you know, my coworker who wasn't really on the payroll, like, I'm going to be here doing my thing and you do yours, and I won't bother you. And so that was the kind of the end of, you know, that was really my last paranormal experience. I've not really ever had anything after that happened to me.
Yeah, and that's the thing I was going to actually ask you, is if you thought that this was something that, you know, maybe was somebody that lived, or not lived there. Well, they live there now, but worked there in the past. And that seems to be what you're thinking, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I really suspected that, because there were just this parts warehouse that I worked in. There were so many older guys who were just, well, I'm going to retire here. You know, this is where I'm going to retire from, and I'll either retire here or they're going to find me dead on a forklift from pulling parts too much. You know, and I really wonder if it hadn't been someone who had worked there in the past that had passed away, and, you know, just that was where they decided to come back to for whatever reason. I don't know, but that's kind of where my mind had went to, was because I thought, you know, here I am just trying to work. Why are you dragging stuff around? You know, why are you back here shuffling parts around, you know, to mess with me? Like, what's the purpose behind that? And that's what got me thinking it might have been somebody who worked there, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely makes sense. But one thing's for sure. I mean, this thing was looking so, I mean, obviously you hear things, you things are moving and stuff, but it looked so real that he called the police. I mean, like for you, you're experiencing things and you're already thinking paranormal, but this guy, I mean, he thought he actually had somebody on the property cornered in a room.
Yeah. And that, I got home from work that morning, and I told my wife, I was like, you are never going to believe what happened the night that I was off. I was like, I'm telling you, you know, I've been seeing stuff. I said, you know, Mike, who covered for me, he legitimately thought that somebody was in the building with him, to the point that he called the police on them. And I said, you know, like how freaking weird is that somebody else so much believed that it was a real person that they had the police called to come in there. That right there, man, that's what got me. Because I was like, yeah, there's definitely something there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, at least you're not there anymore. You got out of there strategically, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it was a move for various reasons, and not being heckled by the coworker that wasn't there was kind of one of them. But I moved for you know, just a different position and a little bit better pay, and it just kind of all flowed together that way.
Man, yeah, I guess they were counting the ghost as part of your pay.
That was the extra shift differential there. They were taking it.
Yeah, man. John, well, I appreciate you sharing these stories, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on. Like I said, you know, we've me and my brother both listened to you, and you know, I've had these things in my mind for quite a while that have happened, and I've just always kind of been like, I don't know about sharing them, because they sound like they're just so off. And matter of fact, even some of the guys I worked with, you know, they're like, "What are you doing this Friday evening?" And I was like, you know, going home, and like I was almost embarrassed to tell them, you know, I was going to be talking about my ghost stories, you know. But I mean, these are things that happened to me that just, like, I have no denying that something else is out there. And I appreciate you giving me a platform to be able to share and talk about the experiences that I've had. And I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. And you know what? I'm not going to blame you for shorting me on future listeners by not telling people what you're doing tonight. I'm not going to blame you. I'm going to let that one slide. So,
Yeah.
I mean, come on, man. Where's your evangelistic spirit for the confessionals? I mean, share the gospel. Share the confessional gospel.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. Well, listen, I appreciate you talking and sharing your stories, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a blast to be on, and like I said, we listen to you all the time, and we were raised to believe that there were more things out there than just what we could see, and growing up and having those experiences, and it really brings a whole lot to light, about what actually is out there. So.
Well, that's the show, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, please share the show with your friends. I don't care where or how you share the show. Just share the show if you enjoyed it, because that's the best thing you can do to help the show grow. Share the show with your friends. I don't care where. Just do it. Also, let you guys know, before I started recording these intros and outros and all that stuff on Monday night, I was just a guest on the Union of the Unwanted, where we talked about UFOs. It was a great guest panel, and I think you guys might enjoy this conversation. So if you want to check it out, the link is in the description of this episode. Go ahead and check that out if you so choose. And until next week, stay safe, take care, and remember, the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. Bye.
Push me down and I'll go high.